You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 281 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. We're heading to Wiltshire today, to Charlton Park Estate, which is home to the Earls of Suffolk and Berkshire. And I'm joined by Robin Aird, who is the farms and estate manager there. The farm itself is around 1,450 hectares. That's nearly 4,000 acres for any of you who still like old money. And it's a mix of arable and grassland. On top of this, there's around 5,500 tonnes of grain storage capacity on the site, 78 hectares of woodland, and 560 hectares of various environmental features which are central to the estate's conservation strategy, which is made up of wild bird food areas, cover cropping, wildflower areas, and grass margins. And today we're going to hear a bit more about this, as well as Robin's own career journey. Robin, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome to Meet the Farmers.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. Very kind.
My pleasure. Can you start, please, in the usual way? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and I suppose what led you into your current role.
So I grew up on a family farm. My stepfather had a tenant farm. At the time, I mean, I'm just sub 50. I'll get that out there. But the farm was contract farmed even back in those days. So that was contract farm pre-1980. So it's been contract farm for a very long time. And everything was done. My stepfather mainly focused on shooting and running big shoots, so that's where his role was. And I don't know, I always had an attraction to the land. So I always used to like driving tractors, as you all do when you're sort of 17, 18, and things to slice bread. So I applied to Harper Adams to actually do engineering because I enjoyed that side. Didn't get the grades, so they put me on the HND Ag course, which I then topped up onto the degree course. And I think the key thing I did was I tried to work in as many different places as I could.
Okay.
And get as much real life experience. I mean, the first day at university, I remember sitting in a lecture and a guy called Ian Folds, who's still in farming now, sat next to me. And he started spouting off about all these chemicals and stuff he was applying. And I just realized I knew nothing. And proper wake up call about, hang on, I know nothing about where I'm going now. But I embraced it, and sort of in those days at Harper, you could guide the way you went through your university by choosing a module. So me being me, went for the hang on, a bit of financial, keep well away from that. Animals will keep well away from that. And came out in a very sort of arable agronomy background, having worked on some great estates and done placements around and about the country, which was great. I then done lots of local sort of farms around here and various estates, and then sort of graduated and went to a strawberry and started working on a strawberry soft fruit business over in East Anglia. Okay. We did contract farming and baling for the power station, which at that point hadn't been built. So we were building up the stock supply. And I did that for 3 years, and then sort of someone said this job was going here, which is working farm manager. So I said, yeah, great. And I was enjoying myself probably a little too much out in East Anglia.
It's a good part of the world.
Yeah. I got a phone call 2-3 weeks later saying, look, you really do need to apply for this job. It's like, yeah. And then another week went by and goes, you need to apply for this job today. So it's like, okay. So I fired off a CV, got a phone call that afternoon going, can you come in for final interviews tomorrow? So I shot down here for Charlton Park and sort of drove around, sort of having a look at it from the outside before my meeting started. Anyway, pulled in, found my way into the estate office. And if you've ever been here back in those days, it was a labyrinth. I found it and sort of stood there waiting, and sort of 10 o'clock came and went, no one turned up. Sort of 10 past 10, this guy turned up and said, hello, Lord Suffolk will be around in a minute. Anyway, Lord Suffolk strolls around in his dressing gown. And it's like, I think I can probably get on here. Anyway, had a great interview, went well, got the job and started here as working farm manager. And at that point, I think we probably, off the top of my head, rings a bell. I think we had 590 hectares of wheat. Actually, might have been 400 hectares of wheat and 50 hectares of oilseed rape. Everything else was been set aside, or it was tenanted farms that had been taken back in hand and just left. And then from there, we moved forwards. I then started doing different courses. I did a John Edgar scholarship in 2007, which was good. And it actually happened to be the first year we held WOMAD here. And 2007 was the year that Gloucester flooded. And they were looking to move the whole of Gloucester to here, as we had a ready-made town set up as such. Anyway, the festival went ahead. The conditions were very challenging, and I suddenly discovered I was on the site nearly 24 hours a day during the week of the event. And this is coming from a point where I'd purely only been farm. And coming off the back of the John Edgar, I realized I'd learned a bit about myself, but also the guys who ran the festival said, look, I don't understand why you've got this other management around you. So we had a discussion with the boss, and he said, right, you need to, if you think you can take this forward. And then one of the trustees who's here said, right, if you reckon you can do this, we're willing to back you. At which point I went, I can do the farming easy. The bit I have no idea about is the finances. I mean, I've got a gatekeeper, I've got everything on there, but it doesn't quite match with the accounts. So I then got fired off on an East. Is the Tuesday after the Easter bank holiday down to Potter's Bar to the Vets College, and met a man, a very, very man who's changed my life, called Andrew Mason, who was the managing director of Sentry at the time.
Yeah, of course.
And he took me under his wing. They came in and they trained me over a course of probably 2 years, fairly intensively, on the finances side. And we put in literally everything from enterprise budgets to coding, just everything. So we'd gone from a point of nothing to a really well set up business where we could look. And then, Andrew progressed and kept on pushing me forward. So I went from working farm manager to farm manager. And then he retired from Sentry and carried on actually looking after the estate on a consultancy basis for another, I think, probably I'd say 3 to 4 years. And again, mentored me all to a point where I was managing the whole estate, really, with the exception of the residential. So we had a land agent who would come in a day and a half, 2 days a week, and we worked together really closely, and it just worked very, very well. That carried on for a few years, and then sadly, my boss, my previous Lord of Suffolk, passed away, and the son's taken over, and as you'd expect, he wanted to have a bit more control. So I stepped back and went back onto the farm, and that's where I am at the moment. At the moment, I'm taking on a few of the roles I used to do, all the events and bits and pieces like that. So it's quite a varied thing. I mean, I think the one thing I forgot to say is once I had my interview, and on the Sunday as I was driving back up the A34 to Peterborough, I got a phone call to say you've got the job. I was then going on holiday on the Tuesday, so I went to the local bookshop, bought J. Soft's agricultural notebook, and read it cover on holiday.
Several things I want to pull out of this. The first is, because listeners might not have come across this, the John Edgar Scholarship. Tell us a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, so that was designed by John Edgar, who was a local farmer in Hampshire, and he created, with his inheritance, with his passing, he created this legacy to further farm managers on their journeys. And as the pot got bigger and bigger, they then started branching out into neighbouring counties. And it's literally, I don't know, we did everything from media training to partial budgets. We did lots of visits to farms. It was at that point, around 2007, where everyone was just starting to diversify quite intensely. So we were looking at lots of new diversification projects and then looking back at our business and doing lots of mini projects. And it's a 3-week residential course sort of spread over 1-week blocks away from the farm. So as every farmer goes, oh, I can't leave the place, we suddenly realize you can. So I did that. That was great fun. And then sort of 5 years later, I think 2012, it was 2012, 2013, that horrific year. That winter, I did the worshipful farmers course on advanced business management. And again, that just took me that next stage, which is where I then sort of jumped forwards again.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to do these training things. And I haven't really done anything for a bit. I got about 5-6 years ago, started having a life coach. That was quite impressive. So you're sitting going, yeah, what are you going to tell me? And at the age of 40, whatever it was, probably 45, I discovered that everyone's different. I didn't realize that people work differently. Yeah. You have this disc thing, and some people are sort of like me, a DI, and want to go in one direction. Other people actually like to be told how to do a job and in what steps to do that job.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't realize that. I thought we were all the same, and just you got a set of instructions and off you went. But that was quite eye-opening to me. To most people, would probably go, "Yeah, that's very obvious, Robin."
Well, no, I think it's a really good point generally of taking ourselves out of our comfort zones, isn't it? But also making the time to do these things, because again, the industry is actually full of these kinds of programs. There's lots available, and actually, if you put yourself out there and start engaging with this, it can really. I mean, we talk a lot about CPD, I suppose, in the industry and different ways of doing that. Depending on your role within the industry, you can very much plot your own program in many ways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm basis qualified, so again, I have to do a lot of CPD on that. But the key thing is you're meeting like-minded people who want to progress, people who want to push themselves. And you're setting up lifelong friends. So 3 of the people I did John Edgar with, I'm still in contact with now. Yeah. 2 of them, we actually went off and did the work from company together. Weren't planning on it. We turned up for the interview and all 3 of us were there. And then, yeah, I mean, of that group, I probably speak to 90% of them, and there would have been, there's probably 14 or 15 of us, including the current NFU president, Mr. Bradshaw. Yeah. So,
right.
we knew at the time there he was going places. So, but yeah, no, it is so important. And I mean, even like this morning, I've been at a grain marketing meeting, and you meet up with people and chat and discuss ideas and what are you doing that's different? What can I do? What are you doing I should be doing? And those sort of conversations, which are so important to keep your business moving forward.
Tell us a little more about Charlton Park. Its history and significance, first of all.
Okay, I'm not very good at this bit, but here we go. So
this is the bit we have to include.
Exactly, it's very, very important. I mean, so it was given from Malmesbury Abbey to a family in the late 1700s, and then the Earl of Suffolk then got involved in the 1800s, I believe. And then they're related to the Howards as well. So they then took the other title, which was Berkshire, which then became Suffolk and Berkshire, which I never quite understand in Wiltshire.
I never get that. You got all the Dukes of Devon in Derbyshire, haven't you? And you've got Norfolk is different. They're all in different counties.
They're all in their own counties. I don't understand why. But yeah, no, it's just stunning. So it's got a beautiful mansion house, which the previous lord converted into flats back in the late 70s, which was a good move, as that sort of took out a lot of cost of what normally is in the States. We had a residential portfolio of about 60 properties, but at the moment we are busy sort of selling what I'd call the older cottagey style things, because with a Cotswold house, you buy a house that's got probably a footprint of about 6 meters wide, but 2.5 meters of that is wall.
Yes.
So sort of people like square footage now. You can't. We can give you the external square footage, but the internal is pretty poor. So yeah, we're busy shifting those, and then sort of using that money to diversify into different projects. So when I came here in 2003, as I said, it was a small farm. It was very much estate and farm. and we had sort of 60 properties, and they were all run as it was. I suppose the turning point was 2007 when we were lucky enough to get the contract to host WOMAD, the music festival. It suddenly opened the doors and let people in, and let sort of 35,000 to 40,000 people in overnight, which was a bit different. And then sort of from that point of view, we sort of started doing more and more events, more and more filming, sort of work. My ethos was always to work with people to build their projects. So we had had Mud Runner turning up, wanted to do a Mud Runner here, and then I had another young lad who wanted to do his own one. So I went with him, and we built that up to quite a big concern. We've done filming, and it's sort of always, I base it on a site fee, and then we charge for any extras, which works well. And sort of, I suppose that's it. We've got a business park, which was built before I came in here, and that was built in 2000. I built another one, which we're sat in at the moment, and that was probably about 2018 we did this. And I suppose that's that side of the business, or sort of more the estatey part. Farm wise, it's just really bad land here, sort of grade 3. It's next door to Tetbury, which was the wool market of the UK. So if you go back historically, this was all grassland.
Yeah.
It's very thin. It's 40% clay, 40% silt, 20% sandiness. I'll probably get that sort of 5-6% organic matter. But what I was aware of, and what I always did, was import manure. So I had sewage cake coming in, big tonnage of that. I had chicken manure coming in. I had deals with a local dairy and pig farm where we used to import thousands of tons of muck a year, do straw deals and all that sort of thing. But I suddenly became aware that I was very much reliant on anyone else, and I wanted to have a supply of my own manure. I hate cows. Just before I came here, they got rid of the dairy, and I managed to get rid of the cycler cows in I don't know, I got rid of those about 2014, I'd have thought. I mean, when I say hate cows, it's a bit harsh. I love seeing.
Don't listen, livestock people.
I love cows. I love looking at cows. I love being around cows. As long as they're not mine, I'd have to look after them. So I wanted a supply of manure. So I started sort of looking into AD. And at the time, one of my ex-students had been doing a lot of solar, and he wanted to do solar. And I said, look, I'm quite interested in AD. And he goes, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing something. So he started looking out for doing us an AD plant, and it was probably the worst time to start looking at it. So we went into planning. As we were halfway through planning, they changed the rules on the renewable directive. So we had to go back into planning to change it from a feed plant to a feed and waste plant. So that was that. We finally got planning. Then someone decided to do a thing called Brexit. So no one wanted to invest in AD at all. But yeah, in 2019, just as COVID kicked in, we decided to start building an AD plant. It's early 20, I think. Yeah, so that was third party funded. We rent them the site. I have a feedstock contract. I have a digestate contract. And that gave me a supply of manure. But more importantly, I could see coming down the line sort of these carbon talks, the renewable, regenerative, all this manure stuff, looking after the soil health. And I know most people are probably screaming at their device at the moment going, hang on, AD, maize, digestate, that's not good. I have a love-hate relationship with it. On some days I love it, and on some days I absolutely hate it. But it gives me a supply of manure all year round. I mean, it gives me 45,000 tons of manure every year round, which is quite a challenge to look after and deal with. But we will have the ability. At the moment, they had 2 lagoons on the site. We built another one last spring, and I'm about to start building a third one. Then I will be able to store enough manure to only spread in the spring, because I want to be able to use that product and use all of it. So I don't want to be putting digestate around in the autumn, because if I'm only going to get 10% of the nitrogen, I want to be putting it around sort of as in the next couple of months as crops start growing, so we are utilizing it all. So at the moment, we're growing maize and all the spring wheat on digestate. And if we can this year, we should be able to start growing all the rye on it as well.
Tell us a little bit more about the shift of your rotation, because I mean, you mentioned earlier on that you actually had a wheat and rape sort of start.
Yeah, so I mean, I came here with huge areas of set aside wheat and rape. Again, wheat's always been the driver. So as we got to more and more land in and the rotation we went for, I mean, we've always been based around a 4-year rotation. So it went wheat, rape, wheat, beans. And then as beans just started to get harder and harder with verticulum wilt and droughting, and we jump between winter beans, spring beans, we drop beans out and put linseed in, and you have a great year of linseed and you think, yeah, this is the answer. And then the next year, the disaster. Yep. Then I moved to probably what was my standard rotation for probably 10 years, which was, what was it? It was spring barley, then into winter barley, then into oilseed rape, and then into wheat. Spring barley was going off to Denmark for beer. The winter barley used to go down to a mill in Wales purely for making dog food because they didn't want wheat in the diet, and by growing it up in barley, gave it a premium. So I did that. Oilseed rape was all hair rape, so that was using plastic bag lining. So then we went to the AD. Everyone goes, "Oh, you're not doing food production." And I was like, "Well, I know." And then I went, "Oh, hang on, actually, I haven't really been doing food production.
We're not doing food production anyway."
No. So our rotation now is rye into spring wheat into maize, and maize into wheat. And then with the onset of SFI, we are putting cover crops and wild bird mixes in between. So we cut our rye sort of early to mid-June, direct drill a wild bird seed in, which then stays there all over the winter. We can then take that out in February, and then we put a low and put spring cereal in. We have large areas of wild bird seed which stay in all year round in the poorer areas. So anyone who knows me know I'm a massive fan of Gatekeeper, where it's sort of getting a little bit clunky these days, but I've always done sort of gross margin mapping, so I knew exactly what was performing what wasn't. At the moment an area started underperforming, I'd just put it into stewardship because you could see the difference in return instantaneously. So the farm got sort of divided up by its ability to perform. And we are very varying soil types. So we've got everything from gravel to clay to brash to loam.
Wow.
In the same field. So if you look at a soil map, you've got the lovely swathes of different soil types across the UK, and they all sort of come down to a point in the southwest where they all intermingle. Well, that's where we're.
Of course, yeah. I know the point that you mean.
Yeah. And it's so we've got some Oxford clay, we've got forest marble. It's when it's wet, it's really wet, and when it's dry, it droughts out. So it's challenging from that point of view. With chopped straw for many years as well as selling straw. So I always try and do 50% of the crop of the rotation back in through the chopper. Now, because we're whole cropping a lot with the maize and the rye, we chop the majority of the straw. And I mean, we're putting a lot of digestate on, which is bringing up the indices. I don't know, is it getting better? I put 2-meter margins around every field in 2007 in ELS. And there is a definite height difference between them and the field now. And it's really noticeable. Is that just where things have built up? I don't know. But it's something that as I walk around the farm, I think, we're degrading the soil faster than we think we are. And I'm hoping with the digestate, we can start going the other way. I mean, worm numbers here are very good.
What are you doing in terms of tillage practice?
So, I mean, when I came here, they used to plough huge amounts. In the first year, I bought a Gregoire Besson Discodon, and literally I had a Gregoire Besson Discodon, I had a Vadestad drill and a set of rolls, and that was it. And with a Discodon, when you can go, and when you can't, you can't. And the same with the Rapide. So back in those days, you'd start drilling on the 10th of September, be finished on the 15th. It was like, fantastic, job done. And then as we went further forward, I sort of as the farm got bigger and bigger, we thought, well, I need something else. Well, it was 2012 when it was a very wet harvest and we couldn't move with the disc on at all. I bought a Vadestad Swift, which I've still got now, which is my emergency get out of jail card. It's also very, very good in the spring for getting air into the ground. And then I bought a Solo SL just to give me another sort of 5 days after the Besson before I had to go on to that, because the problem with the Swift is it'd get you out of jail, but in the middle of winter, you could tell exactly where you'd be. And then we started growing maize, the first year growing maize. And that first year, a neighbour I'd been chatting to about sort of trying to work with each other because he wasn't quite big enough. And we sort of hadn't realised we could do quite a nice bit of synergy. And he had a horse Turano. And now I literally use his horse Turano. And then anything we can direct drill, we direct drill. So spring wheat, we try and direct drill. All the cover crops, we direct drill. I bought a carrier so that we had something to do a secondary pass on the maize if we needed to. And I suppose maize has been quite a good learning point because I had no idea 4 years ago how to grow maize. We've just done a rotation around the whole farm with maize. So this is my 5th year growing maize. First year we planted it. We started out with the Besson, then that broke down. Then we got the SL out. That broke down. And then we borrowed Rory's Turano. We ended up doing a whole lot of the Turano. After that year, I sold the Besson and the SL. And yeah, we sort of hired a carrier just to try it and went post that. And then the tempo came in, and anyone who's on a tempo net drill knows it will create amazing seed beds. So we did that. It was like, wow. Then it peed with rain for about 5 weeks, and my mate sort of really struggled to come out. And my contract was very, very nervous, since he'd been sort of helping me the whole way through this process. But yeah, it grew. It was all right. Second year was a wet year, and we just Turano'd it and then just went straight in, which worked fine. The year after that wasn't too bad. This year, very wet winter, we Turano'd it because I knew what the tempo could do. I was like, yeah, don't worry, I'm going straight in with the tempo. So we went straight in the tempo, put it in beautifully. What Robin forgot to think about was preems aren't so good on cloddy seed beds. Not sure where that one went out the window. And the blackgrass in the best blackgrass controlling crop was horrific. Yeah, next year we will Turano and we will work it down, hopefully with the carrier again, like we did in year one, because it does a good job. And then post that, we've done direct drilling trials with avatars, with the Rapide, with the weaving saver time. But this ground, because of the silt content, if you don't move it, it does just slump quite hard.
Okay.
So spring sort of cover crops, summer stuff works. When you tend to go in the autumn, it can catch you out. But saying that, if we hadn't probably cultivated the maize, we could have drilled everything in early October this year. But because of the black grass, I needed a chit, and it forced me for the first time ever to drill after about the 10th of October. So we weren't drilling till sort of early November, and everyone says delayed drilling controls black grass, and I've always taken it. I've said, yeah, I know that, but I've never had the guts to do it, and we were forced down this route, and it's impressive the control we've got this year.
There we are. Okay.
So yeah, I'm very pleased with
that. Let's move on to what's your experience of SFI been so far?
So, as I said earlier on, I'm a big lover of anything sort of granty. So we did OELS on grassland to get the organic conversion payments. Went into an ELS scheme, looked at HLS and never sort of really liked it that much. Went straight into the mid-tier. And yeah, when SFI came out, I jumped straight on it. So I did an SFI 22, which, as we all know, got cancelled. Lost track of time of when it was, probably last year. And then I jumped straight into SFI 23. So I've never really had touch with any issues. I've applied, gone through, done it all myself, created the whole thing so it fitted in with what I wanted to do. And I've always had agreement offers very, very quickly. And literally did SFI 24 just before Christmas, and I've had both of those back and accepted. on that one. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the SFI. I'm a big fan of the capital payments. I'm a big fan of the grants and capital grants, but it's using it for things you need, not using it because it's there.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm guessing that having sort of heavily mapped your land and have pretty much an intimate knowledge of your soils as well for a long time, this is almost a natural next step anyway.
it is, and it's also we're not really changing much. I mean, I did a cover crop trial many years ago, and I hated it because of it left the ground too wet and it didn't do this and it didn't do that. But then you look back and go, well, the reason is this and the reason is that. I'm in a lucky in my rotation that I have opportunities to utilize the SFI. So grow the wild bird mix. And I know a lot of people will be going, well, you're pushing your limit. But actually, if you'd come on this farm in August, I had all my wild bird mix was sort of waist high in flower, and that stayed in flower all the way through to about the 28th of September. And actually, at that time, that this year, when the weather was really pants, and as you went into the middle of November, I still had Phacelia in flower, and it was just
Mm.
historically the whole farm would be brown at that time of the year, and quarter of the farm had flowers all over it, looking beautiful. And then from that point of view, it all set seed. So I've now got these huge swathes of wild bird food that is getting absolutely hammered by all these chaffinches and skylarks and everything. It's great. You go out there with your Merlin app and fire it up, and these swathes of birds take off. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people go, well, you're not really doing what it's designed for, Robin. And my argument is actually go and have a look, because there is so much stuff out there.
Yeah,
And the other thing is
seeing is believing.
yeah, our fields. I mean, in the back corner, you can see this, Ben. There's a picture of the farm, and every single field is weird shaped and small. So we're average about 12 to 14 acres, and every field has a hedge and every field has a ditch. And every field then got a 2 meter margin of mine on top of the cross compliance. So I have a 3 to 4 meter motorway around every field. So a wildlife corridor, all this hedge for them to live in. It's the perfect environment for it. And it's interesting as you grow older and mature, you do change as a person as to what you want or want to see. And you sort of realize the people who you thought many years ago, why do they want you to be like that or do that? You understand why, because of,
You become one of them.
you become one of them. And it's like, yeah, no one cares about the yield. It's all about profit. And everyone used to look at me weird when I was saying, well, I don't care what it yields. So I'm chuffed if it's yielded 8.3. If I've got a higher gross margin than you, it means I've had to handle a hell of a lot less.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's that mindset. But yes, so going back to SFIs, I'm a big fan. We grow, and with our rotation with the rye, we can do that. And then we go into the low input spring cereal. And then coming out of that, we then go into a winter cover crop. With mid-tier, I used to grow the forage cover crop, which they took away, I think, 2 years ago. The issue I found with this, and again, I'm going to be controversial, is everyone goes the golden hoof. I bloody hate the golden hoof. What I've discovered is wherever the sheep had been, it turned the farm into a really wet, stodgy mess. So out on the sort of festival site where you'd graze the sheep across, you could drive across it where the sheep hadn't been grazed. And the moment you hit the point where they'd been grazed, you'd sink out of sight. And the same with the arable. And everyone go, yeah, well, you take them off a lot earlier. Shepherds don't do that. We have a very good relationship with our contract shepherd, but yeah, they get them mowed down like grass. And yeah, last year I think was the icing on the cake when it was this time of year and it had rained it just uncontrollably, and we are getting wetter and wetter here. And I looked at the fields and they were all anaerobic. So we went away from growing stubble turnips. So you put stubble turnip in a field, they graze the grain off, and then they stay out there till they've eaten all the stubble turnips. So I don't care what anyone says, you're still damaging the soil structure. And so I thought, right, I'll go for like a leafy, rapey, haily mix to just whip the top off, take the green out, leave the stalks, off they go. And even doing that, we were getting real issues with damage to the soil to a point where trying to get last year's spring wheat in was exceptionally difficult.
Okay.
So I pulled that out and spoke kind to the RPA, and they let me pull that out as I was going into an SFI, and I wanted to replace that with a winter cover crop. So last year we had the winter cover crop in before the maize, and the wild bird mix is now in front of where the forage rate used to be. So I can come out. I've got this lovely wild bird mix. I've got soils that have been conditioned all winter, and we'll be able to direct drill our spring wheat straight into that. Maize, I've looked at strip till, but with our soil types, I just can't quite get it to work. It goes off. It starts nicely growing in that lovely channel, but then it gets to that point where you haven't moved that soil, but yet you still had the traffic and bits and pieces on it. So I'm not converted on that. And also, if I've Taranoed it in the spring, I know that I can direct drill straight into it, which we have done on the wheat in places. So it gives us a bit of flexibility. But yeah, the cover crops I'm enjoying. Again, grow sort of cereal-free cover crops because I don't want to be carrying disease and burden across. So it's very much that side is based around my agronomic decisions as being basis. And again, also my wild bird mixes are done in a way that make going into next year's crop easy. So we're keeping away from stuff that's big and stalky and stuff that's sort of wiry and nasty. But I enjoy the SFI. I've had very, so far, touch wood, really positive outcomes with this.
Lots of different avenues that we could go in, but I'm conscious of time creeping up on us. So, I mean, before we do round up, I would really like to ask you about your thoughts on agricultural property relief. I mean, Charlton Park is on a different scale to a lot of listeners' farms out there, but it's an issue that is affecting everyone in the UK in their own ways. So, what are your thoughts on the APR situation?
I mean, we've always been, everything's been about succession planning here. So I tried to think probably 15, 20 years, we'd been looking at succession plan. Everything used to rotate around the Balfour case. The state was restructured to work with that. In a way, I'm for it. I think it's good. I think it would be good for UK agriculture because it stops the scenarios where the grandparents still holding the wallet as they disappear into the hole. But it needs to be done in a more logical way. So yeah, let's go down this route, but actually let's do it over a, I don't know, 15, 20-year period where, yes, you do have to hand it over by 10 years' time. You have got to be handing that business over within 7 years, and maybe to take out the bit where they're not allowed to benefit from it, because you can still move it forward. And then actually people are going to start taking on the farm earlier, having the ability to make their decisions and do stuff on a more positive note and give yourself direction. But you cannot go on the 6th of April, we are pulling this plug, because the impact is massive. Yes, let's do it. Let's plan for it, but let's plan it for it long term and go, right, okay, this is what we're going to do for the next 10 years. It doesn't matter if someone dies overnight, because it goes to the next of kin or whoever you want it to go to, and it goes through as it is. But by the time we get to 2035, let's say, you have to have handed that farm over 7 years previous, which is doable. And if someone dies unexpectedly, that's not an issue. I mean, you can't go, well, I wasn't expecting them to die at the age of 100. It's pretty obvious. If you're doing it from the thinking, well, let's say, I don't know, 70, at retirement ages, you should be handing that farm over and have that as a baseline. And you've made sure you've done it by the time you're 58 or by the time you get to 65, then I think it's a workable solution, which would be beneficial for UK ag, because it gives you that ability for the next generation to invest, to do stuff. Because who at the age of 68, 70, taking over the farm for the first time wants to do anything? So I think there would be benefits out of it, but it just needs some serious thought and completely redesigning.
Yeah, and at the moment, from what we can see, that vision does not seem to be coming about.
No, not at all. Which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Just turning briefly to the future of Charlton Park. I mean, there's so many different elements to your business, and you've always got lots going
Yeah.
on. But if you were to look ahead a few years, where do you see sort of future directions of, and I suppose your priorities? Where would they be?
As always, it's been cost control. So any estate, it's always about cost control. And again, it's working with people, relations with people. I have a great team. I mean, I've worked for a lot of people who I've been very grateful for, and a lot of people invested time and effort in me, which again, I'm very grateful for. Where will we be going? I don't know. We are at the moment, we are busy selling sort of properties, as I said. We are sort of reinvesting and pushing probably the event side a little bit more now. We're just going down Airbnb routes and trying to link the two together. So sort of the ethos of the new Lord Suffolk is 1+1 makes 3. So what can we do for someone, add something else in that then creates a third stream? We're working with a local shoot to do bits and pieces as well. On the farm, yeah, I mean, rotation now, as I say, is through the combine is wheat, spring wheat and winter wheat. 2 bits through the forager. I don't really see that changing much. Digestate, we're busy on carbon payments. Digestate is helping us with that. But again, it brings its challenges. The climate also, I look at our rainfall. Historically, we were around 750. We are now averaging 1,000 mil. So we are in a fairly wet area part of the country. BASF used to have a lot of trials here, and they still have the state weather station here. And I was speaking to the guy a couple of weeks back, and he was commenting how I get every single rain event. So we are massive sectorial pressure here. Farming here has been hard work for 20, 24, 25 years. So we're used to be struggled, and we've learned how to make money. And I mean, the farm business is a very profitable business because of that's what drives me. I like looking at the budget, showing big figures. But it only happens through that with working with people. I won't go out for the ultimate deal. I want to have a good deal so that they have a bit of money. And at the end of the day, we're still here to do it next time round, because there's no point taking someone to an inch of their life because it doesn't benefit anyone. It's very much about working all together.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for giving us an insight into the business and into your way of thinking, really, as well. It's been fascinating to sort of see how you work things. We always finish the show with 2 quick questions, which I'm going to ask you now. The first is a message for the public. So if you had a message for the public, any message, what would it be?
Understand where your food comes from and understand the value of it. I think that's quite key. And I don't mean that from a local point of view. I just mean that from a global point of view. Understand just the cost of that production and how tight it is.
And the last one is a message for your fellow farmers.
My fellow farmers. Oh dear. Message them. Love you all. I think that's it. I love seeing everyone. I love catching up with them all. Like I know people from, like you do with farming, every single side of the country, and you bump into people. And I've meetings there. I've seen people I haven't seen for years, and it's nice to see and catch and just chew the fat. It's a great industry we're in. There's nothing like it. From the social point of view, it's pretty harsh and lonely at times, but you've got to embrace that with the times when you're with people.
Let's leave it on that point of sharing the love. I like that. Robin, Ed, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
That is it for today. Big thanks to Robin for coming on. Thank you also for listening. Join me next week. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening. Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk.